How is Guild Wars 2 in the current MMO landscape? My thoughts next. Hey guys, Jerix26 here. So I've been streaming Guild Wars 2 almost exclusively for the past 7 months, and it's made quite an impression on me. So in this video, I'm going to give you my review of the game as being somewhat of still a new player-ish. I'm going to talk about things that I think they do well, and some areas I also think they can improve on. If you'd like to see us playing Guild Wars 2 live, I stream on Twitch around 4 nights a week with my better looking other half, Divinity. Feel free to stop by and we can talk about Guild Wars 2 or chat about any other topic that you would like. If you do like this video, please consider liking and subscribing as I plan on making more Guild Wars 2 content in the future. Alright, let's get right into the video. Guild Wars 2 is a high fantasy MMO set in the world of Tyria. It was developed by ArenaNet and published in 2012. Development of the game continues to this day, and they just had a successful launch of the third expansion, End of Dragons. I'm going to touch on the following areas in my review of the game: the overall look and aesthetics of the game, the combat, the progression system, classes and builds, in-game content, PvP, the payment model, and of course, mounts, since it's a hot topic currently. So let's start off by talking about the overall look and aesthetics of the game. So being an older game, the first thing that caught my eye was how beautiful the game is. The game uses a really unique art style that I find to be very eye-catching, and I'm honestly surprised that a 10-year-old game looks this good. I definitely find myself stopping and looking around in awe at some of the scenes and views, and this is something that is not all common for the type of gamer that I am, being that I typically prioritize progression and learning tough content. I recently dug up a quote from the current lead art director of Guild Wars 2, and I hope I don't butcher his name, Horia Dacio, while he was describing the goal of Guild Wars 2 art style that gives a hint of why the game still looks so great. So in the quote he said, "We work in a style that is interesting, inclusive, expressive, but never puts graphics before art. The ideas and artistic creativity have to take lead if we don't want our game to look dated after many years of people playing every day. While we're always making small graphical improvements and using new tools, we put mood and tone at the forefront of our artistic decisions. And that's what will sustain us going forward too." So I think this quote is really important. I've heard some criticisms lately that the game doesn't look great and hasn't held up well visually, and I just don't agree, frankly. Although the game's graphics are not top-notch, being that it is a 10-year-old game, the art style, scenes, details, etc. are all very beautiful. And this is particularly true of the new maps. I challenge you, walk around Seitung Providence and just take in the views and tell me the game doesn't look great. So let's touch on the music just for a moment. In-game music is a feature that normally doesn't make or break a game for me, particularly in an MMO that needs to have so many systems functioning well to be decent. But I feel I can't leave without commenting on the Guild Wars 2 in-game music because it is so damn good. It is epic and it's thematic, and it really the first time that I played a game that I've been stopped in my tracks by the music and had to pause to listen to appreciate it.
Thank the goddess, Lissa. I was starting to think the Order had forgotten me. Do you have a plan to get out of this place alive?
Sort of. The idea starts with run for it and generally goes downhill from there. Come on.
So voice acting. Guild Wars 2 has main story quest lines for each race, as well as story quest lines for each expansion, and also interim quest lines that they call the Living World Seasons. And each of these are all fully voice acted. The storylines are excellent and immersive, and the voice talent is top-notch. They have a huge cast of amazing voice actors, including some of my personal favorites of Noah North, Sam Riegel, and the amazing Matt Mercer. I also really enjoy the fact that the quest lines aren't just a collection of cutscenes, but more along the lines of epic in-game events that you actually take part in. Alright, so now let's talk about the combat in Guild Wars 2. The combat in Guild Wars 2 is definitely one of its strongest points. It is fast-paced, responsive, and very dynamic. To be effective, you need to be on the move, dodging attacks, and quickly escaping area of effects, while all weaving in your attacks, boons, and heals. One of the things I think is really great about the combat system is that it is very easy to pick up as a new player, as a low floor to entry, but also has a very high ceiling. As you level up and gain new abilities, you find there is a richness and complexity, and it takes a good amount of time and patience to master. For me, it keeps the game interesting, as I feel like when I'm even just running around the map, harvesting or whatever, I'm constantly practicing and improving my combat mechanics and ability rotations, always trying to tweak and perfect the cycle. If I was going to pick one element of the game that it does best, it would definitely be the combat. Out of all the MMOs I played, which is pretty much all of them, Guild Wars 2 combat is superior to them all. Alright, let's touch on the mounts. Coming into the game as a new player, I was constantly being told about, hey, how good the mounts are in Guild Wars 2. And to me, mounts in MMO were basically run speed skins. So, although pretty cool, I really didn't care about mounts that much, honestly. Until I started unlocking some of the mounts in Guild Wars 2. In Guild Wars 2, mounts are not run speed skins. They have their own movement physics and really change the way movement and travel feels. Each mount is vastly different and just feels amazing moving around the world with them. They open up new areas in the game, and they have their own achievement and progression systems, which further enhance how they move or interact with the environment. ArenaNet does mounts so well that, as you might have heard, another huge MMO is pretty much just straight copying them. And I don't blame them. I mean, they are that good. I want to try to keep this video somewhat short, so I'll just urge you to get in game and try them for yourself. You'll see what I mean. Alright, so let's talk a bit about the world bosses and what they call meta events in Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 has the absolute best large-scale open world PvE content that I've ever seen in any MMO, bar none. These can be broken down into two broad categories of world bosses and meta events. World bosses are special event bosses, and there are several that can spawn throughout Tyria. The fights are huge and just plain epic. After the boss is defeated, a large chest appears and provides great rewards, including high-level equipment and crafting components. There's also what Guild Wars calls meta events. Meta events are large-scale, dynamic events in a map that require multiplayer coordination to complete. They are very immersive, and they tell a story as you play through them. They typically culminate with a massive boss fight, some of which can be very challenging, such as the Dragon's End meta in the newest expansion, End of Dragons. The world bosses and meta events are typically on a set timer, and you can check the timers by typing the /wiki ET in chat anytime, and it'll bring up the wiki page that shows the world bosses and meta event times. Alright, so let's touch on progression in Guild Wars 2, how your character progresses. Character progression in Guild Wars 2 works something like this. You level your character to level 80 by exploring the map, completing heart quests and events, and progressing through the class story. At level 80, the game then really opens up. Guild Wars 2 has an immense amount of horizontal progression. You continue to gain levels after 80, but the experience is put towards mastery tracks, which when combined with mastery points, lets you unlock or enhance new account-wide benefits such as gliding, mounts, or fishing, among many other things. Your character also gains hero points while exploring the world, which are then used to unlock new class specializations and abilities. Each class currently has 3 elite specializations, which you can unlock that can drastically change the play and overall feel of a class. Gear progression in Guild Wars 2 is slightly vertical to begin with, in that the different tiers of gear being Fine, the blue gear, Masterwork, the green gear, Rare, the yellow colored gear, Exotic, which is the orange color, and Ascended, the pink, all have an increasing amount of stats as you go up in the tier. Having at least exotic gear is usually a good starting point to start doing some of the endgame PvE content, such as fractals, strikes, and raids, and you want to start working on getting each gear slot upgraded to Ascended. The Ascended gear is where the gear vertical progression ends, as the highest tier gear, which is the legendary or purple colored gear, has the same power level as the Ascended but offers quality of life benefits and is just super cool looking and has awesome visual effects. Legendary armor and weapons offer a long-term goal to work towards, and each piece can take several months to complete. Personally, I really enjoy the progression system in Guild Wars 2. I'm the type of player that really has to always have something in an MMO to be working towards. I love to have those long-term goals to slowly be chipping away away at, and then be rewarded with gear or items that show off all your hard work, dedication, and mastery of the game. Levels in Guild Wars 2 don't advance past 80 with expansions, and gear power does not surpass the Ascended and Legendary tier levels, so if you take a break from the game and come back, you can pick up right where you left off without losing any ground. So Guild Wars 2 dares to be different. Guild Wars 2 does a lot of things differently than many other popular MMOs on the market. Many other choices I really like, and it gives the game a refreshing overall feel. There's actually a long list of things that they do differently, but I'm going to go over some of the big ones. Firstly, there's no holy trinity in the game. A group doesn't need a typical composition of a tank, dedicated healer, and DPS. Each class comes with the ability to heal themselves and have group buffs or boons they can share. A tank class or tank build is almost never needed with the exception of a few endgame raids. Players don't rely on a tank to hold aggro or soak up damage for them, but instead actively move or dodge away from attacks or abilities themselves. Also, any class can adapt their build to be more DPS, support, or heal focus. This really provides the player with an enormous amount of customization, so they can really play the game or class how they want to. There's also no gear treadmill in Guild Wars 2. Player levels, as I said before, stop at level 80 and stay level 80 even after every expansion. You don't have to grind all the new gear tiers every time there's a new expansion. This is really an interesting take on gear progression, and it fills a niche for players who want to enjoy the game but are burnt out from the constant gear treadmills that other popular MMOs use. Guild Wars 2 is also different in that higher gear tiers only provide a modest power increase, and that generally player skill matters much more than gear power. To maximize your potential in endgame content, you need to know how to best pick what stats you're running on your gear, what abilities you're bringing to an encounter, how to maximize your ability rotations, how to move and position properly in an encounter, etc. As far as questing goes in the game, Guild Wars 2 also has a refreshing take on that. There's no quest hubbing in the game, and generally I don't mind quest hubbing, but it does always seem to break immersion for me in an MMO. In Guild Wars 2, quests are received much more organically. In the open world, there are heart icons scattered throughout in designated areas where your character can assist and receive rewards for doing so, and there are events that pop up all around the map that you can take part in. The world just seems much more alive and fluid than a lot of other MMOs. There are also personal story quests and expansion story quest lines. I have to say that these are handled the best I've seen in any MMO. They're story heavy, but not set up in just a collection of cutscenes. Your character plays through and is an integral part of the storyline, in which world-shattering and cataclysmic events are happening all around you. Alright, so let's talk about the classes/professions and the builds. So Guild Wars 2 has 9 classes, or professions as they like to call them. Each class currently has 5 base specializations and 3 elite specializations that you can unlock. Each class consists of any 3 of the base specialization, or 1 of the elite specializations and 2 of the base specializations. So this gives the player a ton of build variability for each class, and this large amount of variability helps enable the player to be able to play each class in many different ways. You can basically pick a class that you like thematically and play it how you want to play. The elite specializations further change the classes and give them different weapons that they can use, different abilities, and an overall different feel to the class. Being somewhat of a build crafter myself, I do enjoy the many options and playstyles you can create with each class. Alright, let's talk about the different things a player can take part of in the game. There is a massive amount of things a player can do in Guild Wars 2. A player can work on map completion, which is kind of like completing all the quests in a certain map and visiting all the points of interest, etc. This gives rewards, and full map completion is needed for working on crafting legendary weapons. There's events in the maps that pop up spontaneous all over that you can take part of. There's massive scale world bosses you could hunt down and take part in defeating. Large scale meta events that happen in different places around Tyria that provide a lot of rewards. In-game special theme events that happen for a limited time, usually around holidays. There's several 5-man dungeons to tackle. There's fractals, which are sort of like mini dungeons and have their own progression system attached. There are raids and strikes, which are 10-man content. There's world-v-world battles constantly going on, consisting of constant struggle of taking keeps, towers, supply depots, and other targets. There's a fully fleshed out PvP system, which includes both ranked and unranked matches and tournaments. There's jumping puzzles, achievement hunting, working on legendary armor and weapons, and much, much more. The sheer amount of things to do in Guild Wars 2 is definitely a strong point, and to its credit, Guild Wars 2 definitely does each of these very well, actually. Map completion is relaxing and enjoyable. The map events are dynamic and varied. The world bosses are absolutely epic. The dungeons, although it seems that they're no longer releasing new ones, are really great old school dungeon crawls that are entertaining and can be somewhat challenging. The fractal system adds a nice layer of progression with great rewards and is very popular in game. The strikes and raids are pretty quick and have a nice distribution of being anywhere from fairly easy and accessible to overall challenging and requiring a lot of coordination and strategy with your team. And the World v. World is fairly well known as some of the best, if not the best, of any MMO. If I had to say anything against the immense amount of things to do in game, it would be that sometimes when I log in, I just stare at my screen for several minutes just trying to figure out what I feel like doing at that day. I'm curious, how many of you have this happen to you as well? Please leave a comment below. Alright, so let's talk about the World v. World and PvP in Guild Wars 2. So first coming to Guild Wars 2, I had already heard it had some of the best player versus player content in any MMO. It was fairly well known for it already. I was mostly interested in seeing how well the rest of the game played. Additionally, I've never been very big on PvP in a MMO. Don't get me wrong, I love PvP, but I usually prefer to play strictly PvP games for PvP, such as League of Legends, one of my favorite games of all time. I usually aim for progressing to N-tier PvE content when I play MMOs. Because of this, I didn't even try any of Guild Wars 2's player versus player content until I was well into level 80 on my main. I started with some of the World v. World content and fell in love with it instantly. My better looking other half, Divinity, also tried it at the same time I did and also fell in love with it. To date, it's her favorite content in game. And for me, I would say it's on equal footing as the Fractal and Strike systems. Guild Wars 2 has two distinct PvP modes. One is termed the World v. World game mode, and the other one is referred to as the PvP game mode. The World v. World game mode combines both PvP and PvE elements in which players from different servers battle each other and try to conquer and hold different map objectives such as towers, keeps, and resource camps. Players can participate in different ways in helping their server capture or defend objectives. They can join large Zerg squads and follow around the commander and do large-scale objective raiding, including laying siege to keeps with catapults, rams, and siege golems to break into the defenses and storm the keeps. Players can also join smaller Havoc squad type groups and go capture smaller objectives such as towers and supply depots, or wander around solo or in small groups and pick off straggler enemies and assist where needed. Having participated in all these sectors, I can say all of them are fun and fulfilling, and I typically change what I'm doing in World v. World daily depending on what I feel like playing that day. Additionally, I find it fun to theorycraft different builds to play in World v. World, as the varying different playstyles lend to having different builds while playing, and I typically run a few different types of character builds depending on what role I'm playing in the World v. World maps. The PvP game mode has different types, including team deathmatch and conquest maps, and you could play either in ranked or unranked games. Both World v. World and PvP have their own reward tracks, where participation is rewarded with progression on the reward track, and great loot can be won, including World v. World and PvP legendary armor sets. I have not participated much in the PvP game mode yet as of the creation of this review, so I'll hold my review of that for a later time. I can say though that I have a lot of friends who do play the game mode, some of them which do so exclusively, and they find it very enjoyable. Alright, now let's talk about the payment model that Guild Wars 2 uses. So Guild Wars 2's payment model consists of the base game free with no paid subscription cost ever. There are currently 3 expansions which you must make a one-time purchase to unlock, and there's also an in-game microtransaction shop where you can purchase unique skins and account quality of life upgrades. There's other games that have this sort of type of payment model, but the question is the same as in other games: how free to play is the core game really? Some of the other games have free-to-play versions that are so limited that it's hard to get more than just a small taste of the game without having to purchase upgrades. Guild Wars 2 free-to-play core game is actually massive and includes 8 out of the 9 classes, PvP, World v. World, Dungeon, etc. All in all, many hours of content. You'll have to purchase the expansions to unlock elite specializations and raids, but all in all, there's a ton of content for free. I want to just comment quickly that you can in fact farm gold in-game and convert it into the microtransaction currency that they call gems. So theoretically, it's possible to not ever have to spend a dime on the game to unlock all the features, but in practice, I believe that this is actually not very much of a viable option for most. Alright, so let's talk about some of the drawbacks of the game. I would identify two main areas where the game can improve, and these would be currency bloat and inventory management. There's a very long list of currencies in the game. Separate currencies exist for World v. World, PvP, dungeons, fractals, raids, strikes, and several specific maps, just to name some. Luckily, there's a special inventory space called the wallet they use to store the in-game currencies, but this is definitely very confusing for new players and can be overwhelming at times. Inventory management is also a constant struggle in the game. Most rewards for completing quests, events, dungeons, etc. consist of giving the player a bunch of items as opposed to coinage. This combined with a boatload of different quest items, crafting materials, and gear can leave a new player with constantly full inventory, and it take quite a while to understand the best way to deal with or liquidate all this inventory items that is constantly acquired. Alright, so here's my final thoughts. Guild Wars 2 is a fantastic game that still looks great after 10 years. The soundtrack is very epic and thematic. It has the best combat in any MMO, and it's very fluid and dynamic. The mounts are amazing, and it handles large-scale world events better than any other MMO on the market. The base game is free to play, so there's no reason not to give this fantastic game a try. The game is pumping out fresh content and updates at a very regular pace, and they even gave word that a 4th expansion is in the works. As an additional huge plus, the developers are very involved in the community and they absolutely love the game that they made. I've got to meet several of them in stream and in game, and I've even grouped up and played with some of them. I mention this because this level of developer community involvement is not very commonplace at all in my experience in the MMO world, and as I said, to me, it's just a very big plus. So to conclude, I highly recommend this game, and it seems to have a bright future ahead. Go ahead and give the game a shot. There's a lot to enjoy and love.